Hello everybody, DMGeezerjim here. Thanks for joining me today. We're starting a new series, trying to get a little bit shorter. Been dying to talk about monsters, how to run monsters, how to use them in combat. Oh, and my cat's gonna block my mic, lovelies. Apology for the cat tail there. But yeah, we're been fiddling around with it, so I'm trying a new format. We're just gonna go a little bit shorter, a little bit quicker. Talk about some of the monsters that you can find in 5th edition, and give you guys talk about as DM to DM some advice to keep in mind as you run these creatures in combat encounters, some things to keep in mind as you prepare the actual encounter and process. Players, if you're a player, enjoy the content as well, learn something new about the monsters. I'm all about sharing knowledge, I'm about knowing it. Just don't be like metagaming it too hardly. But anyway, let's get into it. I am nowhere near organized enough to go alphabetically, but we are going to start with an A monster today. The first one we're going to look at, is going to be the Aboleth. And today we're going to talk about three important things to know as a dungeon master when you're using an Aboleth in combat. Okay, thing number one, just so you know, we're referring to 5th edition using D&D Beyond, the standard stat block as presented in the monster manual. Don't want to go too crazy with anything outside of that. Certainly, this is all rule as written. Homebrew, anything goes and everything goes. But hopefully with this advice, you shouldn't feel like you need to homebrew. So, ugly critter, Aboleth. It's an aberration. Pretty large. It's considered large class aberration from outer realms, from beyond space and time, Cthulhu-esque type creatures, whatever. Think of it as an oversized whale meets sea slug with extra tentacles, 3 eyes stacked above each other, and a big old nasty mouth. It's an ugly creature. But first thing, rule number one, first thing to know about running an Aboleth is it's an aquatic creature. It has a swim speed of 40, but it only has a walking speed of 10. Right out the gate, it is never going to be able to fight creature. It's not going to be a viable opponent for your party on land. Putting an Aboleth on land is handing a challenging creature to your party on a silver platter. It doesn't have the movement to do anything. It doesn't really have a lot of ranged abilities. It is a swim speed 40, an aquatic creature. It's a big old heavy husky chunky brother. It's not going to get on the land if it can at all help it. In a given world, it's not even going to escape if its only choice is on land. It's going to fight to the death because it knows it's going to get caught. So keep the thing in the water. One of its main defenses, the mucus cloud, is dependent on the water. We'll talk about that a little bit when we get into the abilities. The ability to enslave an enemy is a 30-foot thing. If it's on the ground, it's never going to be able to keep in range. So putting an Aboleth on the land is going to make it fight badly. It's dead. It's toast. Put the thing in the water. Let the thing be a water breather. Let the thing fight in its own element. As part of that, not only does it want to be underwater, odds are it's going to be in its lair. Typically, you're putting a creature in its lair to make the fight more challenging. There are certain creatures that, by default, in my opinion, are lair creatures. Aboleth falls directly into that category. As this big old enslaving aberration, it has its lair. It uses its minions to do everything else. So odds are your creature is going to be in its lair. So be aware of the lair actions of your creature as well. Regional effects can certainly come into play with that if you need to add the storytelling the storytelling mechanisms to draw that. Regional effects are kind of one of those things, as editorial comment, are one of those things that you can use to enhance tell story, to give clues that this creature's there, whether their party's not aware it's there and they need to be aware, or whether they're closing in on this creature and they're starting to learn. Either or, the regional effects can be fun. Now, the lair actions are pretty potent as well. We'll talk about that when we get into that section, which is number 2. So yeah, number 1 rule, man, put the guy underwater. Make sure the guy has some space to use its size and its movement. It's a large creature. If you put it in a 20-foot by 20-foot cavern with 5-foot tunnels to connect it, once again, it has a disadvantage. An Aboleth is going to use an underwater lair that it can maneuver in very well. An Aboleth is in my opinion, it's an important enough monster, a mid-tier monster, to where and an intelligent monster, intelligence of 18, wisdom of 15, charisma of 18. It knows what's going on statistically speaking. It's going to set up its lair in its most advantageous spot, underwater, with enough space for it to move around very easily without squeezing. Rule number one thing to know about Aboleth, it's going to fight underwater. Your party is going to have to deal with it underwater. Rule number two, knowing its abilities. Know what it can do. I spoke about the mucus cloud a little bit ago. This is its primary defense. Whenever a creature is within 5 feet of it or touches it or hits it with a melee attack while within 5 feet, it makes a DC 14 Constitution savings throw. The creature is then diseased for 1d4 hours, and it can only breathe underwater at that point. Its second thing to keep in mind is its enslavability. Can target one creature it can see within 30 feet of it. The target must succeed on a DC 14 Wisdom saving throw. It will be charmed until the Aboleth dies or until it's on a different plane of existence from the target. There's no given duration for this other than those two things. So if you enslave, you own that player character under these conditions. They get to save against the charm when they take damage. They get to save against the charm once per day if they're away from the Aboleth by a mile. Other than that, they're enslaved. So the third thing to keep in mind is the disease ability that comes off the tentacle attack. The Aboleth can make 3 tentacle attacks during its round. As an action, it multi-attacks. As that multi-attack, it takes 3 tentacle attacks. Or it can enslave, or it can use a tail attack. Okay. Main attack, 10 foot reach, plus 9 on the hit. Moderate damage, 2d6 plus 5. Not the end of the world, but a Constitution save or become diseased. The disease has no immediate effect and can be removed by any magical ability that cures Lesser Restoration, Cure Disease Potion, Kyogtum's Ointment, something like that. A mundane disease cure will take care of it within the first minute. But after the first minute, the diseased creature becomes translucent and slimy, and they can no longer regain hit points unless they're underwater. And now the disease can't be removed unless you have a 6th level spell, 6th level heal or higher magic, 6th level or higher that will remove the disease. And whenever the creature's outside of water, they take 1d12 acid damage every 10 minutes. Okay, so these abilities are what I call attritional abilities. What's going to happen is not going to have an immediate impact on combat. This is going to require your party. It's going to use up a lot of resources. It's going to change the dynamic of the fight after the fight. And Aboleth isn't necessarily a game-breaking monster as far as a BBEG, in my opinion. It's something that certainly caused some issues with your party going through something like a mid-tier boss, that mid-checkpoint. Because now someone's stuck underwater until we can figure out how to cure this disease. Homies can't regenerate his hit points, and if he's not in underwater, he takes damage. And we also lost Chuck with the enslavability, who went swimming off down the tunnel after the Aboleth. Okay. And then you have the lair abilities, casting a phantasmal force on any number of creatures within 60 feet of it. Pools of water within 90 feet of the Aboleth, surge in a grasping tide, so all of a sudden he can use the water. If your party's sitting up on the ground, you can use the water to knock people prone, or even pulling them into the water or knocking them prone. But it can't use this lair action again until it does a different one. And then water in the lair becomes a conduit for the creature's rage. The Aboleth can target any number of creatures it can see within the water within 90 feet of it, and they must succeed on a DC 14 Wisdom saving throw or take psychic damage. So he's got to cycle through the lair actions just like they cycle through the legendary actions. But knowing how these abilities work together and affect your players is key. So, big chunky brother wants to fight. Rule number one, first thing you need to know, keep him underwater. Keep him in his lair. Second thing you know, understand it is that the actions of the Aboleth, the main attacks of it, are not instantly deadly. Odds are, unless you get really lucky with some charm spells, your player should be able to deal with the Aboleth. But the effects of its tentacle attacks, the effects of the slime are resource, and they have a heavy impact on resource and planning for your party. Attritional damage, okay? The third thing that you need to know, the third thing in my opinion to keep us, to make an Aboleth a playable, entertaining, and challenging monster is they don't fight alone. Okay, because he's a big old chunky brother who charms things, lays around in his lair, he's going to have servitors. By default, these are called scum, S-K-U-M. Lovely picture of this strange octopus meets weird dude. Something that failed the enslavement and was affected by the tentacle attack and ended up staying around the Aboleth long enough to turn into this. CR5 meat shields, AC 14, that's a little bit low at this level, especially considering the party that's challenging the Aboleth, but that's not a bad thing. Pretty durable, 93 hit point on average. They're going to take up some damage. They're impossible to charm, impossible to fear. You just got to beat them down, but they don't do well outside of water. Now the scum is a major factor tactically for your Aboleth because of its mind-breaking touch ability. Now, rule is written, it's going to attack twice with its trident, its pokey thing, and then once with a mind-breaking touch. If the creature hits with its mind-breaking touch, the target ends up with disadvantage on its wisdom savings throw, which now suddenly matters if a scum can hit somebody, and on the next turn, the Aboleth can then use the enslave ability on the person who has a disadvantage on wisdom savings throw. You now have a potent combination. You now have a potent problem, a significant problem for your party to deal with. So, in its lair, surrounded by its minions, all of a sudden a mediocre monster turns into a serious encounter. I don't necessarily say that I would put an Aboleth as a BBEG level bad guy. For a low to mid level, low level campaign ending at 10th level, it could very well do that. Ironically, it is actually the BBEG in the Ghost of Saltmarsh campaign, where your party ends up at the Styes, but it's also got a Kraken with it, so it's a little tougher there. But anyway, even as published, it's in its water, it's in its lair. So yeah, the scum are going to be its muscle, its shock trooper, its servitors. Be cautious using too many of these, because even though your party is supposed to be facing a challenging fight here, 4 scum plus an Aboleth will likely overwhelm a party below 10th level. Between the mind-breaking touches, the amount of hit points that they're going to have to do, the fact that they're underwater, remember, then this becomes a very challenging encounter. But make sure that these ugly bastards are available. Make sure that your Aboleth, if he gets in trouble, even if there's only 1 scum here, right now 1 or 2 more will join the fight later because you're in the lair. So, yeah. Okay. Guys, that's kind of really it. I mean, that's as much as I'm going to talk about. I could talk about an Aboleth for 6 hours. No one wants to hear that, and that's okay. But, few quick brief tips to keep in mind. Aboleth is a cool monster. It's this creepy ass aberration. There's a lot of lore about it. If you dig into some of the older content, through the 3rd edition book of aberrations, I'm just going to show cover art real quick. Does a amazing job of talking about the Aboleth's biology, talking about their cosmology, talks about a lot of stuff. This is a really good additional source book if you want more information about the Aboleth. But yeah, keep it underwater. Keep it in its lair if at all possible, but without fail, make sure that Aboleth fights underwater if you want it to be challenged. Rule number 1, one thing to know. Thing number 2, know how its abilities impact your campaign and your combat. They're not going to be other than the enslavement, which can be. Everything else is attritional damage. The disease that keeps your party from breathing air for a few hours can throw off the speed of a campaign. The disease that turns your party's skin into slimy stuff, and they take damage if they're out of water. Attritional things. They're not going to bite your party's head off. They're not going to have this end of game breath weapon. They're not going to be able to magic jar or banish your party. It's attritional damage. But last of all, they're never going to be alone. So the increased threat of their enslavement is there if you put 1 or 2 scum in attendance and allow them to use that ability to hit one of your parties to give them disadvantage on their wisdom save. Now you've got enslavement going on. I do want to add, as always, that this is an intelligent creature. This is a bonus point. Intelligent creatures of this kind of origin are not going to fight to the death unless they have to fight to the death. If it's in its lair is going to have an escape. So it's going to fight to a certain point and then leave. So unless it's a cumulative final battle type thing, an Aboleth is going to retreat when possible. It's going to have 2 or 3 of its scum do its thing. It's going to try to enslave somebody, and then it's going to bail off. And then it's going to find an advantageous point to either return to the fight or make the party go further into the lair. So yeah. All right, guys, DMGeezerjim here. Thank you for joining me for the first of hopefully many monster fight videos. A little bit shorter, quicker bursts of information. I hope you've enjoyed it. Like, follow, subscribes are greatly appreciated. I have a full library of more lengthy videos that go into a lot more detail, editorial content, and advice on how to apply given adventures or settings to your campaigns. But we're just going to focus on monsters. Monster at a time, scenario at a time, 3 things to know about them, 3 things to learn about them, maybe 3 things to love or hate about them. But hey, Like, follow, subscribe. If you've enjoyed this, let me know. If you want me to do a specific creature, leave me a comment. Any feedback is appreciated. I'm over on Twitch 5 days a week, chatting D&D Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. You can join me over there for a live chat at any point. Etsy's Patreon's going on pretty good. Got some new products over there. So if you want to support our projects there, that's also there. But thank you for your time. Appreciate you. We'll see you soon.